idea of attachment to God is one of the topics that I'm very passionate about. It actually started with one of my graduate students doing her master's thesis on that topic. I was supervising her work, and we got to do a lot of exploration here. She did a great job with that. The idea here is that when we talk about attachment, we think about the parent, we talk about the partner, we talk about just relationships in our lives. But we don't think about it quite often that this might also relate to how we attach to God. And the idea here is that our very early interactions with our caregivers, who are perceived to be the authority figures for us as children, the higher power basically in our life, how we perceive this relationship to be, how we perceive ourselves to be loved or rejected by our caregivers has a direct relationship with how we eventually perceive God. So for example, when someone perceives their parents to be very warm and accepting, research shows that they tend to also perceive God as a loving figure in their lives. As a figure I can go back to even when I do something wrong, because I feel that with my parents I was also able to do that. On the other hand, research shows that when we have very harsh relationships with our caregivers, when they were very punitive or perceived to be rejecting in different ways, it is more likely, not for sure, but it's more likely to perceive God as a punitive figure, as a harsh figure in our lives, to be afraid of God more than to have a loving relationship with God. So there is also a lot of research now being done in the lab, some of it carried by my students, about how we tend to forgive ourselves or not, based on how we perceive God to also be a forgiving figure or not. I don't like to make it sound deterministic though, because many people will have very challenging childhoods and will turn out to be perfectly okay, because it's not just about the relationship with the caregivers. We have different relationships in life. So if my relationship with my caregivers were challenging in any way, there are still relationships with friends, teacher, mentor, therapist, other people in my life that might have shaped my personality in other ways. We call it a corrective emotional experience. And the other scenario is also true. Sometimes people had very positive childhoods and then they get into abusive relationships, for example, that again shake their beliefs about themselves and create negative impacts later on. So it's not just about the caregiver, but we also say that because it is the first relationship that we have in life, it is very important as a foundation.